Welcome to today's webcast, which is a unique webcast in our Creating Knowledge Workers for the Greener Product Marketplace series, where we're pausing to celebrate and thank the educators who have contributed great stories and great curriculum examples over the past few years. We're taking the opportunity to revisit their stories, and this time to curate some of these stories into discipline verticals, because all the previous webcasts, for the most part, have been about a diversity of disciplines in each webcast, with a little bit of less focus on each discipline. But given that school's out for the summer and it may be a little early to start thinking about next semester, but time to plant the seeds, we figured we'd regroup some of these webcasts by discipline so that folks could come and see some of the examples. And what's true for all of the educators and all the webcasts, the intent is that by integrating environmental sustainability into any kind of curriculum, it's all about preparing students for getting jobs in the greener product marketplace or in today's and the future economy, which has to consider environmental sustainability across the entire life cycle of product manufacturing through use and end of life. And so this is all about both schools, educators in schools, keeping pace with the market by offering this curriculum and thereby attracting better and more forward-thinking students. And manufacturers will recruit out of these schools, and these schools will continue to set the bar for preparing graduates to go into the marketplace with marketable skills so they can get jobs and provide value to the organizations they're joining. We have been very excited to be able to offer the software through the cloud from the very beginning, and therefore we've seen considerable adoption all around the world, even in places that we would never have imagined. And we kind of keep track. This map does need a little bit of updating, but one of our favorite dots is this one on the island nation of Mauritius. We had a student from the University of Mauritius using Sustainable Mind software. Don't ask me how he found us, I guess search on the internet, but we get excited when we see people from lesser known places getting current with the marketplace. So today's customer stories that I'll be sharing are great examples, and I don't want to say that they're the best examples, because every educator who has shared their story really has had a best of their own experience to share. The reason that I selected these three to aggregate into today's webcast was because what we're trying to demonstrate is that really any educator can take and use Sustainable Minds to integrate lifecycle thinking and LCA into any type of curriculum, independent of their own experience and background. So today you're going to see a range of different types of people who have no expertise in lifecycle thinking and LCA to a lot of expertise in LCA, but not in business. A whole range, and each of these three segments that we'll be presenting in the next few weeks, the educators have been selected for that very reason, is to show the range of backgrounds, the range of expertise, and the creativity that each educator has brought to their curriculum development, and how the students have benefited from the way that it's been delivered. So I'll be using the presentation decks that each of the educators used, and at the end I'll have the URLs to each of the presentations. We have a blog post and the replay of the webcast, and at the end of this presentation we're happy to send you this deck, but also they're online, and you can watch any and all of them at any time. The first presentation we're going to look at is from Sharon Prendeville, who was formerly at the Ecodesign Center. She's now at the University of Delft. But the Ecodesign Center is unique, and I figured I'd start off with that as kind of an interesting case study, where the Welsh government created this service available to manufacturers in Wales to be able to become knowledgeable about Ecodesign and LCA, so that manufacturers in Wales could actually improve the environmental performance of their products and make greener products. And so Sharon was dispatched through the Ecodesign Center to go work in manufacturing organizations to train them to do just that and to teach business model innovation. The next customer story we'll take a look at is by Jay Beeks, who is an adjunct professor at Marylhurst University in their Sustainable MBA program. And you'll see Jay is an early adopter, or maybe I'd say an early to figuring out Ecodesign and LCA, but no less excited and passionate about integrating it into his curriculum. And finally, we'll take a look at Thomas Kwan's customer story, which was just earlier this year. Thomas teaches in the Yale University Executive MBA program, and was very interesting about his course is that he built it from the ground up, specifically to teach those MBA, the executives coming back for their sustainable MBA, how to use LCA to make decisions that they'll be faced with in the jobs that they're currently doing, and future jobs. So 3 very interesting professional training applications and graduate school. We also have a lot of undergraduate programs using Sustainable Minds, and we'll visit those another time. So to introduce those of you who are not familiar with Sustainable Minds on today's webcast, a little bit of background about the company. We started about 8 years ago, and we've always had the same mission, which is to operationalize environmental performance into mainstream product development and manufacturing to drive revenue and growth through greener product innovation. So it's an innovation and growth strategy. And the way to be successful at doing that is to combine 2 disciplines, one being Ecodesign, which is the discipline of applying lifecycle thinking to the design process and looking at each stage in the product's lifecycle for opportunities to design differently and create improvements. And the other is lifecycle assessment, which is using the scientifically globally accepted method for measuring the environmental impacts of products and systems. And so when you think and design differently and then measure, you are going to get truly greener results. And it's important to understand that just thinking differently without measuring doesn't ensure actual or meaningful improvements. And we've heard time and time and time again from our business customers as well as our education customers that anytime they assumed that employing one or more strategies would create an improvement, when they went to measure, more often than not, it turned out to be no, which proves the point. You can't assume. You always have to measure. And conversely, if you only do LCA without ever thinking differently, you're likely to see some improvements, but probably only incremental, because you're not approaching the problem or restructuring it differently or really looking for where the most meaningful improvements can be made. So it's important to do both, and that's what we teach and enable through the use of sustainable minds. Thinking differently is where the innovation happens. Measuring is not innovative. People measure what matters. It's how the measurement generates results that get driven back into the decision-making process. We talk about environmental performance and greener. We use greener as a code word. It means environmental performance, which we like to talk about performance rather than impact, because environmental performance is a criteria in product development that sits alongside functional performance, cost, aesthetics, all the other criteria that manufacturers use traditionally to make trade-off decisions about what products to make. They have methods and tools to be able to measure and make trade-offs, but until fairly recently have not had tools or the ability to have environmental performance data early on to be able to make these trade-off decisions. That's why we like to talk about environmental performance rather than environmental impacts. There are real business drivers, both from competition, regulation, risk management issues, as well as on the growth side of brand building, new product innovation, and new revenues. So with all of those drivers and market demand for improved products, there's lots of opportunity to create innovative products, lower costs, and ultimately increase margins and revenues. Companies making it a goal will achieve competitive advantage, but it requires new knowledge, processes, and tools. And thus, that's why teaching to develop the knowledge and skills in higher education and bringing them directly into the marketplace means that graduates coming out of these programs have more value and bring marketable skills. One of the case studies, or one of the customer stories that we'll share another time, was from another faculty member at Merrillhurst who was teaching a marketing course and was using sustainable minds and teaching life cycle thinking to educate her students to be able to evaluate the actual environmental performance improvements in actual products, to be able to shape marketing stories and claims, which is a very powerful way of teaching people that you can't just make kind of offhanded claims. You actually have to be able to substantiate those. And so we see designing and marketing of greener products as not just two sides of the same coin, but drivers around a continuous improvement loop. That designing greener products means you can actually credibly market greener products, build demand, build a greener brand, continue to make improvements in your products, and continue to have new and compelling products and compelling stories in the marketplace. But the process needs to start in early stage product development, because if you don't start measuring until you're into detailed design, all of the environmental performance information or decisions are already locked in. Because it turns out that decisions about materials, energy requirements, recyclability, product lifetime, those are all variables in early stage design. And by the time the manufacturer decides what we're going to make or what they're going to make, it's too expensive to change those decisions later. So being able to effectively do scenario planning and easily create many competing concepts to see where changes can be made to drive improvements saves manufacturers not only time and money, but it's where the innovation happens. And so we named the company Sustainable Minds to indicate that everybody kind of has to be thinking the same way so that they can act the same way. And so thinking the same way means understanding the full product life cycle. It goes from raw material acquisition through material manufacture, product manufacture, there's transportation and distribution between each of these stages, then into the use phase. There's recycling as well as reuse that goes back into the manufacture phase and end of life. So there's a lot of considerations and opportunities in the life cycle for improvements. And now this is all part of the content that we provide in the Learning Center in Sustainable Minds to teach Ecodesign and LCA. Here's our Ecodesign strategy wheel that takes those life cycle stages and looks at the kinds of strategies that can be explored and implemented in each of those life cycle stages to mitigate impacts and drive meaningful improvements. And what's been discovered is that where real innovation happens is when multiple strategies in multiple life cycle stages get used in any given project. Moving forward to a quick tutorial on LCA. LCA is overseen by a whole series of ISO standards, and this is the standard model for the lifecycle assessment process. You define the scope and goal of the study. What are you trying to learn? Being explicit about that. Then the model of the product system is built, and looking at, depending on what the study is trying to evaluate or what you're trying to learn, you model as much of the life cycle stages as you need to answer those questions. So if you're just trying to answer a question about is a material less or worse than, better or worse than another, then you really only need to model some information in manufacturing. If you're looking to answer a question about comparing the impacts from one product system to another, then you have to put in enough inventory data to be able to equally model each of those life cycle stages for those product systems to get comparative results. And you get the impacts once you've built the models from the inventory, and it's an iterative process. You're always looking at what does it mean, how can I make it better, what can I change up, how can I improve. So there's interpretation between each step and each stage. Because what we've done is created software for product development teams who largely are designers and engineers and business people, but not so much comprised of LCA experts, we had to make LCA more understandable. And we also tried to integrate some of the terminology from those disciplines into the life cycle assessment terminology. And so we coined this term system bill of materials. So anyone who is in manufacturing engineering certainly knows what a bill of materials is, but now we're talking about a bill of materials for the product system. And so this is a quick explanation of how life cycle assessment reports environmental impacts. So you can take any of the inputs that go into the system bill of materials. All of those inputs can be described by chemicals, by chemical data that's called LCI data. And when you put any or all of those data through the lens of an assessment methodology, that data can, those chemicals can be attributed to one or more kinds of impact And each of those impact categories can be attributed to one or more kinds of damage, either to human health or to the built or natural environment. So to make the life cycle assessment process simpler and more understandable for non-LCA experts, we created our Single Score LCA methodology using methods from the EPA. Tracy is the actual method, normalization and weighting from NIST, and underlying life cycle inventory data, that chemical data, from the trusted sources that's used in the high-end or more explicit LCA tools. And suffice to say, the single figure score rolls up the impacts from all of those impact categories into a single figure score that we call a millipoint, which is not an absolute value. It's a comparative value. The millipoint only has meaning when compared to another millipoint. Now, what we also do is we take out the global warming impact category score and convert it into carbon equivalence, which is an industry standard measure for carbon footprinting. And so we offer a single figure score and a carbon equivalent score for all of the inputs in the product system that's in our impact assessment database. Now we have thousands of data for inputs into the product system, but often folks want to model with data that either is specific to their own manufacturing facility, so that's in business, or they want to model new materials or processes or consumables or energy values where there is no existing data. And so part of our service offering is to create data on request, either as a proxy if it's not publicly available, or working with manufacturers to take their primary data and be able to add it. So that is a service that we also sell into the education space, as particularly as educators put together products or projects that may be specific to their course and want to be able to have data that's specific to that project. And we've done that a number of times. Quickly, I wanted to just mention the Learning Center, which is, we like to say, the equivalent of about 150-page textbook. And we are always surprised to learn about the price of textbooks these days in the hundreds of dollars. Sustainable Minds offers a software and an educational solution all in one place. This is just to show you an example of the kind of content that's in the Learning Center: data tables, case studies, and pretty much explanations for not only how to use the software through the whole LCA process, but a lot more information about the methodology and Ecodesign and et cetera, et cetera. Now, probably the most important lesson and the most quoted soundbite that people latch onto from me is this one, which is: there is no such thing as a green product. Green is a relative value. Something can only be greener than something else. And that's why I made the point of saying our millipoint scores are relative values. They only are meaningful when compared to another millipoint score. So what is important is the percentage of change between the baseline or the benchmark and any competing concepts or concepts that you're exploring. These are the real meaningful and understandable data points of how much improvement or lack of improvement is being created. Just to wrap up this preview section, Sustainable Minds is all about enabling benchmarking and comparing and analyzing those comparisons, creating new comparisons until the team or the individual is satisfied with the answer to the questions or the results of the model, and then the ability to share that information easily to substantiate decisions and move that forward. So I'd like to get into Sharon's story, and she told us this story a few years ago. Quick background on Sharon. So a lot of experience, very knowledgeable about Ecodesign and LCA, had experience both in consulting and academia. And the Ecodesign Center's role in education, again, was to go into industry and help manufacturers integrate this knowledge into the way they were making products. Additionally, they also did go educate folks in other universities at different levels and in different disciplines. This is one of the examples that she shared in a textile product technologies course. And so here's the description of the course: product lifecycle and sustainability. It was taught to, the equivalent of freshmen in our system. And the importance or the aim of the course was to introduce students to the importance of life cycle thinking and analysis in relation to textile product design. She integrated some of her own curriculum, introducing these key concepts of hotspots, LCA, the standard ISO 14040, introduced some eco-innovation case studies. And this is one of the eco-innovation case studies that she showed, which is the design of this orange box chair. Where she was able to not only share the case study with the students, but actually give the students an example set of data for the chair with the challenge to model the chair with alternative materials that would deliver the same performance and see what kind of improvement could be gained. Now, what you're seeing here is the reference is not here. She's just showing a couple of examples from different students where changing some of the materials created a dramatic reduction of performance versus one that showed some moderate improvement, but it's quite a range of over 500% increase in impacts to a very modest improvement. And it inspired a pretty powerful discussion. They were able to dig in and talk about why aluminum was creating the greatest impacts. How is aluminum made? What are the design decisions that were driving the choice of materials? What eco-design strategies could be utilized to drive performance improvements and meet the design criteria of the project, and then the ability to kind of extract the key learnings. How does recyclability reduce impacts? How do choices of materials impact durability? Trade-offs between durability and recyclability. These are all very significant learnings, particularly at kind of a freshman level, to start taking into design and engineering. And so the key learnings coming out of this for the students were how to use a combination of strategies and indicators to make decisions, and that eco-design strategy is dependent upon the business model. So how is that manufacturer selling those chairs? Where do they make their margins? How are they marketed? All of these considerations came into play. And the key learnings for educators was the usability and the utility of sustainable minds, the ability to kind of quickly highlight key concepts and explain them, visually and through a hands-on approach, the ability to link strategies to impacts and the corollary benefits or lack of benefits. Also the insight that the Learning Center, which I just realized she spelled center the English way because the Ecodesign Center is spelled that way. So, invaluable tool to have effectively a textbook as part of the tool, and it gives confidence to educators to be able to integrate design, to integrate LCA into design. And she kind of called out the trends of more interdisciplinary projects happening in industry, so requiring more people to have accessibility to this knowledge and the language that goes with it. The trend of starting to make this type of content or learning as part of a core course. The ability to upskill educators, as I was saying earlier, folks who have never taught Ecodesign or LCA before can start using Sustainable Minds because of the content in the Learning Center, our case studies, our webinars. We have example curriculum. Really, anyone can get started. And her final trend that she noted was to help develop criteria or policies for required curriculum in sustainable design education. Industry takeaways about the importance of this educational trend is to see competencies of eco-design thinking in the design process coming out of school, and with students coming out of school with an eco-innovation mindset. The next educator whose customer story we'll review is Jay Beeks, who is an adjunct professor in the Sustainable MBA program at Marylhurst. And his course, his experience is that he's had a great deal of background in engineering, business, and management. He himself has a sustainable MBA, has worked on a number of conservation projects, and is really committed and interested in sustainability. Marylhurst, for those of you not familiar with it, offers a sustainable MBA in an accelerated online format. So that's important. I failed to mention that earlier. Sustainable Minds is really a great tool to use in a distance learning course, as well as in a face-to-face physical environment. And it's used in both kinds of curriculum. And in this MBA program, the average age of the students are working adults. And again, that's in contrast to the freshmen that we just learned about in the previous course. What he did was, he wanted to teach how to integrate lifecycle assessment into the project planning process. And he broke it down into kind of a 4-step process in his own, kind of using his own language, and developed discussion questions about each of the steps in the process, so that they had a structured discussion when they met to discuss, which was again an online course. So they did some simple projects: table, chair, garbage can. He just challenged them to look at some different materials, be able to talk about the results in a knowledgeable way, and generally assess the whole process coming out of it. Had the students developed some facility in being able to think about how to structure a project that included LCA, be able to do it to some extent, and then be able to extract the key learnings and the benefits from it. What he pointed out is that, this was interesting too, and again, it's a distance learning course. People work in teams. People work in teams virtually all over the world all the time now. And people are working in teams virtually doing new things. So this was a great opportunity to do just that, was to get them to do something new with people they didn't know remotely, but all using a common tool structured around a common process. And the results were that the groups organized quite well and were able to be successful in achieving the goals of the project, which was to develop some facility and understanding the process and being able to talk about the results and make some decisions that made sense. So what I liked about his presentation was that for him, these were the important deliverables, because the course was about getting people in industry to be able to, again, be able to talk about it with some facility and some knowledge. And so he collected a lot of these quotes. Again, these were his deliverables. And some of them are funnier than others, and some are more inspiring, and some are more general. But there wasn't anyone who came out of the process who didn't have a key learning and an insight about the value of that process. And some are pretty technical, which is important, and some are high level, which is fine too. People play different roles. So the key learnings from the students were that product design and development is more extensive than they realize. Again, business people. That material selection and material processing are both important considerations. And here we go. Here's an example of this. First assumptions are often incorrect. Even later assumptions are often incorrect. And key learnings for educators, for Green MBA programs, the value of introducing the tool early in the program is high value, because it's something that can be utilized over the entire length of the program. At the choice of the student or the teams, right, to be able to take a skill they learned early on and use it in a project to drive that project forward or create more benefit. The ability to play, because Sustainable Minds is designed to be very explicit or very general. It is easy to just run scenarios. And because the results are in real time, when you add inputs to the system bill of materials, you can look at the results tab and it's already calculated, what you put in there. And so, those having that information kind of along the way doesn't mean you have to wait till the end to make a better decision. You can make informed decisions in the process. And, he used it to create practical exercises that encouraged great discussion and to enable leadership and group thinking. So his summary was exploration of different types of measurement tools is essential for sustainability students to understand when a screening tool like Sustainable Minds can be used versus when a more explicit tool like Gabby or SEMA Pro should be used for a full-scale LCA. They've been purpose-built for different use cases. Systems thinking is a fundamental tenet of sustainability, and lifecycle thinking and systems thinking are integrally linked. Working in teams is vital, so having tools that support teamwork, and finally, again, having skills that add value so that when students leave the program, they have valuable skills that get them jobs, and they also feel like they got value for their tuition and will recommend the program to others. The last story I'm going to share is from Thomas Kwan from Yale University, and this young man was incredibly passionate about teaching this course, and even more so about sharing his story. And it's a great story, I have to say. He is at Yale, as I mentioned. He's an instructor. He's a research fellow in the Yale Center for Engineering, Innovation, and Design. This is the new Yale School of Management, which is really a state-of-the-art facility, which you might expect Yale to have. And the MBA program, their tagline is educating leaders for business and society. It attracts all ranges of folks in industry. The courses are taught by experts, and the students are sent there and endorsed by their employers. Now, in this course, Sustainable Design and Innovation, the whole idea was to teach these MBA students the concepts of sustainable design, ecodesign, and LCA so that they could experience in a hands-on way what these concepts or fields of study are, to be able to prepare them to go back into their jobs and be able to make better informed decisions from using LCA, which they may not be doing themselves, that they've hired consultants to do, or they have groups in the company to do that work. But now they understand, what are these tools and how can they make decisions using them most effectively. He showed this really nice makerspace that Yale has now, where he absolutely took advantage of that resource and designed a project where these folks actually had to go build example products. So in that makerspace, they built and prototype products. They used Sustainable Minds to run scenarios and understand impacts. And he really created a very structured curriculum. The first two projects, he provided the data, provided the description of the products. So it was very controlled. He called it contrived case study. And then from that baseline learning, they went on to do one real rapid design project. And here are some examples of the results. I should mention that the surgical gown project, that's one of the example projects that we deliver in Sustainable Minds, the data and the system bill of materials. So he used that project as their first kind of learning entrance. And the results were, they understood how to use LCA. He wanted to reinforce the very low learning curve. The next contrived project was our toaster project, again, that's provided with the software, the bill of materials, and the data. and a little more involved than the surgical gown, and able to get some good results. The students had some fun with it. And again, here's this point that sustainability intuition is not reliable. You can't make assumptions. You have to measure things that you would assume that, oh my God, this really got to be an improvement. Let's cut this out. Well, you go to measure it, not so much. Some other small thing that you would not have imagined has much greater impact than this other thing, and therefore, wouldn't create a meaningful improvement. So he then went on to talk about the open project that he gave, and was really, really excited about showing how these visiting executives had to actually go make stuff in the makerspace and do a full-blown, physical presentation that included, environmental impacts relative to cost commitment, and so that they really did understand why it was important to do that early. And the takeaways are largely not dissimilar, right? The students' takeaways are, wow, functional performance is critical to measure alongside environmental performance. The learning curve for using sustainable mines is low, and that green design can catalyze innovation. That's an important learning for business students. And educators can bridge design thinking and sustainable making, which is fun. Looking at how executives can learn to communicate more effectively with LCA experts so they can have that conversation. So again, a theme from the previous course, learning to have facility with the language and knowing how to talk with it. And there's nothing like doing it yourself, being able to use a tool hands-on, even if it's not the full-blown expert use of LCA. It is an immersive and representative experience. So I hope through those 3 customer stories, you too can see how we're really focused on helping educators and schools develop curriculum that will prepare students to go out into the workforce and get great jobs and change companies who are making products to help them make even better products and drive innovation and growth for those companies. So Sustainable Minds is easy to use. That we hear that from every single educator. There's sometimes some trepidation from folks who are not that much in love with using software, but it always turns out to be the case that easy to use. They don't even have to teach it in the course. The students can pick it up and learn it themselves. Because it's in the cloud, anyone can work anywhere. You're not tied to the old library model of installing a desktop application. And we have affordable and scalable pricing depending upon the size of your course. You can try the software. We have a free 7-day trial. You can purchase it online. We do request that if you're an educator using Sustainable Minds in your curriculum, that the students purchase their subscription. We have a $49 6-month subscription for students. The educator subscription is a year, that's $350. And you can see our business pricing. The actual price is $1,400 per subscription, so it's a pretty substantial discount for education. And we also have a quantity discount program, so scaling from small size classes to larger size classes to rolling out Sustainable Minds in multiple classes in a department, making it available for every student in a whole department, and even looking at making it available to everyone in that school. So these are the customer stories that we went through today. Our whole webcast series can be found here on our site at this URL, and here are the actual URLs for each of those stories. And I want to thank you for attending today's webcast and sticking around till the end. We actually don't have any questions that haven't already been addressed. And so I'm going to take this opportunity to end a few minutes early. And once again, thank you all for coming. And we look forward to being in touch. Have a great day.